So welcome to Faith and Trust in God, lesson number 9. For those that are here in the class live, you'll have to excuse me. I know there are quite a few people who watch the class each week as I upload the recordings. I didn't want to miss that, so we had started for 3 minutes. And I'll do the same recap that we did until now, just so that, for the sake of the recording. And I hope we won't have any problems in our connection because I'm here in Arizona, but hopefully we should be fine. So again, this is lesson number 9 of Faith and Trust in God, and we've been on this journey to try to understand how can we trust in Hashem. As Arnold put it, the manna has stopped falling many, many years ago. And we're trying to figure out a way that we can work out the balance between trusting Hashem and putting in our best effort, putting our best foot forward. So as a reminder, for those that weren't here in prior weeks, over the past few weeks, we've been on this journey where Rabbeinu Bechaya has been introducing us to 5 necessary prefaces in order to trust in Hashem. And number 5, which we introduced last week, was that human intervention is often needed, but that despite human intervention, even though Hashem wants us to have human intervention, He wants it to be a partnership between the two of us. And as we brought last week, that it seems to be obvious that human intervention is required. We see that even at the most miraculous of times, even at that time when Hashem was training us at our, birth as a nation, namely when we were leaving Egypt during the 40 years in the desert, when God gave us this unique opportunity to train ourselves in trusting Him, in learning to trust Him, when every single morning, besides for Shabbos, of course, and on Friday would fall twice, the manna would fall from heaven, and we would have to go out and collect it. So we pointed out last week that even when it came to that, there was a necessary human intervention that was needed, namely to at least get off your couch, or tent couch, whatever they had back then, go outside and collect the dew. Because it didn't arrive directly into your mouth. It didn't arrive directly into your digestive system like that. You were just supported and you didn't have to worry about anything. You couldn't just trust God, as we've been espousing, or we've been touting, I guess, until today. So human intervention is often needed. And we brought that as proof from verses, from the scriptural sources in the Torah, where we see that they definitely needed more than just trusting in Hashem. But now, Rabbeinu Bechaya is going to attempt to do that even just logically. He's going to say, if you just look around, it would seem obvious that Hashem often wants human intervention. So, why don't we dive right into it? And Arnold, can you get us started? Can you see this text properly?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay.
When
human intervention is often needed.
Yeah. When we contemplate the necessity for man to strive and exert himself in the completion of his affairs, we find this to be obvious. For when a person needs to eat and prepared food is placed before him, if he does not employ the necessary steps to eat it by lifting it up to his mouth and chewing it, he will never be able to. He will never abate his hunger. The same is true of thirsty men in need of water, and all the more so if we cannot attain food unless he labors to prepare it by grinding, kneading, baking, and so forth. And still greater and more strenuous effort must be made if one has to buy the food and then prepare it. It is even harder if one does not have the money with which to buy the food, in which case one has to make a greater effort and take steps more distinct than those mentioned above, either hire himself out for a wage or sell precious objects and belongings and the like.
So clearly, thank you, Arnold,
yes.
Clearly there's human intervention required. Now, we haven't gotten yet into the why. That's our next order of business. But let's just talk about the facts on the ground. Hashem could have created the world. Right till now, I've been saying with the story with the manna. Think about it on a day-to-day basis. Hashem could have created the world that we wouldn't need to lift a hand to our mouth in order to eat. But Hashem created it in such a manner when everyone across the board, at the very least, needs to get that. What do they say? They say you can bring a horse to the water, but you can't force it to drink, right? And it needs to bend its head down and drink on its own. So everyone in this world needs to bend down and drink. It's not just horses. Let's break that myth right now. Every human being the richest man in the world, who lives in ancient Rome or Greece and has servants galore, and they're all feeding at his every beck and call, and he's maybe the king who almost conquered the entire world, Alexander the Great, or he's Napoleon, or he's, I don't know who. He's got everything at his disposal, right? Still needs to, at the very least, put his fork down, stick the food into it, and put it into his mouth. Even those pictures of the Romans, right, when they have the grapes hanging, you got to eat it on your own. And Hashem created us in that manner. Now that's obviously few and far between among humanity. Most human beings have to do much more than that to get that grape into their mouth. Some of them just need to go out and buy the grape and put it into their mouth. Some of them need to work very hard to make money in order to be able to go out, in order to get to buy that grape, in order to be able to put it in their house and put it into their mouth. And that's just grapes. Let's talk about bread. You need wheat. You need water. I'm in Arizona now. Clearly, there was a time when here having water was a very difficult thing. We're in the middle of the desert, right? If you don't have water, you don't exert yourself in finding that water and finding that wheat and grinding that wheat and making that bread and making that food and eating it, it's not going to work. For starters, Rabbeinu Bechaya wants to point out the fact that it seems to be a fact that Hashem wanted to create the world, because clearly it is in such a manner. Hashem wanted to create the world in a way that we will need to invest effort in order to get our food into our mouth. And I guess that the major question is, how much effort should we be investing? In other words, at what point is the amount of effort that we're investing too much effort? And then the question becomes, are we kind of diminishing our trust in Hashem by trying to put in too much effort to try to make more money than we really have a right to? Or are we trying to, not trying, but are we, as a result, diminishing our trust by convincing ourselves that we can make more money if we put in more effort? Because clearly, when it's all said and done, it is all up to Hashem. But yet he wants us to put in that effort. So that's the balance that we're really going to spend the next few weeks talking about. How much effort should we put in on our behalf? And how much should we just be, trust in Hashem, trust in Hashem. Before we keep going, let me just point out that, of course, while Rabbeinu Bechaya is talking here, and by the way, over the next few weeks, he's going to be using the terminology and the analogy of sustenance, in other words, our finances, providing for ourselves, etc. The same would be true for any part of our lives, whether it's your health, if a person is struggling through a disease, or even just struggling through day-to-day health, whether it's major world calamities. The trust in Hashem works the same way. The analogy that he's going to use for how much effort we put in and how much Hashem puts in and how much we should just trust in Hashem is going to be providing for our families, providing for ourselves and our families. Okay, so the way that Rabbeinu Bechaya is going to go about this is he's going to start by asking the obvious question, which is why? Right? Why would Hashem do this? Let me just get you guys to the next page without going too far. Why would Hashem make us need to put in all of this effort when Hashem could have? Oh, I'm sorry. I actually went one page too far. Why would Hashem make us invest all this effort if really he's in control of everything, and he could have created it in a way where we don't even need to lift the fork to our mouth? All right. And in this regard, he's going to introduce two reasons in his view why Hashem would do such a thing. They are both deep. So today I hope to cover reason number one and hopefully some commentary. If not, we'll pick up the commentary next week. Lisa, you want to read for us a little bit?
Okay.
Go for it.
The reason the Creator obliged man to exert himself and search for the means of obtaining a livelihood and other necessities is twofold.
So you see that even he himself uses the word twofold, uses the word other necessities as well. In other words, he's not just talking about a livelihood. Okay, what's the first reason?
Okay, first, since divine wisdom demands the trial of the soul with service of God or rebellion against him, God tries the soul with what will reveal its choice in the matter, namely with the need and want for that which it is external. God tries the soul with what will reveal its choice in the matter, namely with the need and want for that which is external to it: food, drink, clothing, shelter, and sexual relations. He commanded human beings to seek and obtain.
Hold on, I'll get you the next page there. Go ahead.
It's too small. Oh, there we go.
That's not the text.
It's getting there. It's just lagging a little behind. Okay, go ahead.
He commanded human beings to seek to obtain these requirements through the available means in specific ways and at certain times. What the Creator decrees a man should attain of them, the man realizes and attains through ample means which are provided him. What the Creator does not decree that he should attain of them, he does not attain, and the means are withheld from him. His service or sin is demonstrated through his intent on and choice of one to the exclusion of the other, and this then determines reward or punishment, even if he does not carry it out in deed.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So before I start to explain this, let me just clarify that there is an answer to the other question we asked. In other words, what is the balance? How much effort should we be putting in, and how much should we be just trusting in God? But we're not holding there yet, okay? But there is a correct answer to that question, and there is such a thing as putting in too much effort. In other words, convincing ourselves, whether actively or subconsciously, that we are in control of everything, and that if I work more, I can make even more money than God intends for me. Or if I hire a better doctor, then I can be well, even if God intends for me to be sick. So there is a correct answer to that question. So based on that, says the Chovas Halevavos, that reason number one for why Hashem would create this hard balance for us to navigate, because it is difficult. I mean, many of you probably never even thought about this question. You know, what is the balance between how much effort I should be putting in and how much trusting in Hashem? The reason why Hashem would create that balance is precisely that, precisely for the struggle. And before I get to his words, let me kind of back it up. Let's dial it back a couple notches. I'm afraid what I'm going to say now is probably, there are probably quite a few people on the call that are familiar with this, but at the risk of that, I'm going to lay the whole thing down from the ground. There is a verse in the Torah, in Tanakh, I forget exactly where it says, I believe it's in Ezekiel, I don't remember exactly, don't quote me on that, that says, Shokav Amudei Shesh, which mean that God's thighs are pillars of marble. And obviously that's not meant to be taken literal. There's lots of commentary that discuss it. One of the commentaries, the Medrash, which says, you know what Shokav Amudei Shesh means? The word shokek, which mean like his thighs, are let's use the other root of the word instead of shokek for thighs. Let's use the word nishtokek, which means to have a deep-seated desire. And it says, what's shayish? Shayish is what means marble. So he says an alternative reading could be shesh, which means 6 days. Whereas the Medrash puts it, Hashem had a deep-seated desire to create an abode for Hashem down here in this world that was created in 6 days. From here, throughout commentary, we see this threaded, specifically highlighted in Chassidus, Tanya's, particularly in the Chudei Torah and Torah Or, Reb Rashab's teachings of Tafresh Samach Vav. I'm just throwing out these quotes in case some of you are familiar with some of them. These are teachings from the Alter Rebbe, the Reb Rashab, some of the Chabad Rebbes. But this idea really precedes them all the way to the Arizal and in Kabbalistic sources, that the whole idea of creation of this world is to create a home for Hashem down here in this world. How does Hashem's home how do we build a home for Hashem? Physical world seems to be here already. If Hashem wanted a physical world, he has it already. No, the way that physical world comes about is as follows. Hashem created the world. What is physicality? Physicality is basically the product, the end result of a long process which Hashem was leading up to. And which, frankly speaking, I know nothing is hard for Hashem, but Hasidically speaking, or Kabbalistically speaking, on a spiritual level, that's a difficult thing to do, to create a physical world. Why? Because what is physicality at its core? Physicality at its core is a world where godliness is not your knee-jerk reaction.
Perceived. Yeah.
Is not, well, perceived is a very light word. Where godliness is not perceived, that you can say even about higher worlds before this physical world. But it's where godliness is the least natural phenomenon. And that was a very big deal for God, because imagine it. I don't want to go down a theological rabbit hole and start to discuss all of these different philosophical issues, but let's just start with a very basic one, which is, okay, God is everything. There is nothing else. God created the entire world. God's infinite light, in the words of Kabbalah, fills the entire void. So then how does God go about creating the world? The answer is that God needs to kind of create a void where he is quote unquote not there in order to make a space for him to make something which can exist and convince itself that he's not there, right? But if he leaves any of his entity there, then that physical world is not going to be physical. It's going to automatically be completely submitted to the will of Hashem. But he's trying to create a world that's not submitted to the will of Hashem. And yet at the same time, Hashem is infinite. I hope I'm not twisting anybody's brains here, but on a very simple level, the question is, if God is infinite, then he can be finite as well. And if God can be finite as well, then how is he still infinite? Can God still be infinite while creating a finite world? And that's a question that's discussed at length in Chassidus, and I'm not here to answer today. Is everybody still with me, or I lost a couple of you 5 minutes ago?
I think you said it very well. It's very simple.
No, I said it very well. It's not so simple. Steve, you with me?
I'm with you. I unmuted myself for that.
Okay, Lois? Lois, you here?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Lisa, Andrea, Stephanie, good. Okay, so where are we getting with all this? That there was obviously, and this is exactly where Chassidus goes with all this, there was obviously a very, very strong point that Hashem was leading up to by creating this physical world, because it was such a philosophical conundrum. Not to say that it was difficult for Hashem, but it was clearly an active choice that Hashem wanted it to be a world where godliness is not your natural go-to first choice default, right? So once God created that, he then put inside these little test experiments we like to call human beings. And he told us, hey, guess what? I want you to choose godliness. And therein lies the entire purpose of creation. In other words, the purpose of creation was to put us here in a world where Hashem is not the natural default, and yet, despite all that, despite the fact that we could choose a Tesla or a good meal or some other great novel or book, and instead we choose to pick up a Torah, instead we choose to do a mitzvah, instead we choose to use that money for a good purpose, right? When we overcome that challenge, when we overcome that choice, that gives like a rush to God. That was the purpose of God creating the world. By the way, I use the word rush, but by the way, it's not so far from lexicon that's used in Chassidus. In Chassidus, the terminology used is a taiva. A taiva means kind of a will, a desire that I have that I really can't explain. It's just something I like, right? You go and ask somebody, why do you like your steak medium rare? I don't know, I just like it like that. What's he going to start to explain to you? The meat is not as chewy and this is not as that, but I just like it, which I tell you, right? Why do you like vanilla ice cream? You don't like chocolate ice cream. I just like it. It's on the one hand, it's a very superficial and kind of outwardly thing, like external. But on the other hand, it's actually very internal, because it's directly connected to me. I want it. That's it. In Hebrew, they have it in modern Hebrew. That is, in Yrit, they have a term they call bali or lo bali. They say it comes to me or it doesn't come to me. Right? You can ask somebody, you want to go with me to wherever? You want to go with me on a trip? They'll say lo bali. It just doesn't come to me. It's not. And they talk that way because it's really, you don't always have to explain it. Such a desire, nobody asks you to explain why you like vanilla or why you like chocolate. It's in Hasidic terms, it's very similar to that. Or as a matter of fact, it's the opposite. The reason that we have these kind of desires is because Hashem has these kind of desires and we reflect them. So that's the type of will that Hashem had to have a godly revelation that he should be at home, that he should have this world where he's at home and he's comfortable, even in this physical world, or in other words, this world which defies him, so to speak, which doesn't show him naturally default as his existence really is. Okay, so that being said, you know what? Now that we've explained that, let's actually go down into the commentary. We'll read it inside. Does anybody remember what page we're on? I think we're on page 53. So let me just move it to page 52. Then we'll go back down to the commentary. Okay, Steve, you want to read for us a little bit?
Can you make it a little bit larger, please?
Yeah, coming right up. So just to clarify, we are quoting the word that Rabbi Bechaya says, divine wisdom demands the trial of the soul with service of Hashem. Because I don't know if any of you caught that, but those are actually some powerful words that he throws in there. You're saying to serve Hashem, Hashem specifically wants that there should be a trial. I don't get it. God gets some sort of kick out of me struggling, right? What does that mean? What does that mean? So I kind of give you the building blocks for it, but let's see how they lay it out beautifully. Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, divine wisdom demands the trial of the soul with service of God. The purpose of creation was in order to elevate the Jewish soul from its previous state before it descended into a body to a higher level of divine consciousness. That can only be realized through overcoming the challenges and tests that the soul will have in the physical world. In Hasidic teachings, the purpose of creation is explained on the sages' teaching.
It's coming up. Hold on. It's just a little slow. It's lagging.
Okay. That God desires a dwelling place in the lowest worlds.
Oh, this is the medrash that I was quoting earlier. Tanchuma. Go ahead.
That is, God has diminished his energy to the extent that he created a coarse and materialistic world where godliness is obscured and is a world of darkness. And all this was that man should introduce and reveal in such a setting the presence of God through suppression of material desires and transforming the world into a divine palace.
So I'm sorry, I'm going to cut in here for just a minute, Steve. They tell a great story about back in the days in Russia that a chassid once needed to travel from one city to another city. This was right after the locomotive came out for the first time. And so he comes to the train station. He's told he's going to come here and he's going to get onto the locomotive. And he heard about this locomotive and the whole thing, whatever. And he sees steam popping out of the top and he sees that people are getting on the works, right? The miracle of the locomotive. And his friend, who I guess was a little more involved in the world, catches the chassid. He's looking at the train, right? He's looking at the train. He's looking under the hood and he's looking on top to see where the steam comes out. He's looking at the locomotive. He says to him, "What are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking to see where the horses are hidden."
Oh, gosh.
Right? Why? This story, I don't think it ever happened, but this story is a very, very powerful analogy. Why? Because sometimes we're so used to our existence that we keep looking for explanations based on our existence, based on the reality that we know. We look for explanations for something that maybe surpasses our existence on a much higher level. Similar to the way this chassid was looking for the horses inside the train. He's like, I don't get it. He says this world. He couldn't think past the fact that something could move by something else other than the force of a train of a horse pulling it. So Hashem created the world in such a way. Think about how powerful that is. In other words, the real power behind the world we know. And whatever, we could talk about this in a different class. And for those of you that are taking Judaism Decoded, we're actually going to get to this point. Whether we know or whether we believe, the point is the same. We know that God powers everything. God is behind everything. And whether we can logically point to that or whether that's something that we have as a deep-seated belief, the point is the same. So if so, that means that Hashem had to create a world in such a manner that no matter how far you look under the hood, you'll eventually get to God, but it'll be so hard for us with our existence, right? Because what do we know? We know computers, we know cars, we know food, we know, right? We even know a little bit of medicine. But what do we know about God creating the world? What do we know about spirituality, about godliness? Nothing. To us, so far as we're concerned, we make everything. We're human beings. We're the king of the world. Right? Says Hashem, I'm going to create a world where literally it's going to be outside of its own box to think about Hashem. So how powerful is it when we do find Hashem? Steve, pick it up where you left off.
Okay, finding God in the worldly reality where everyone and everything is self-centric, and the soul demonstrating that it is not only godly when it is in a spiritual state, but it remains committed to God and affects its body in some vein, despite the harshness and struggles of this physical world. This is clearly a challenge for the soul. The goal is, however, that when the collective body of Jewish souls are able to achieve this revelation of God and lead the world to messianic times, then it will be the revelation of the essence of God, and the soul and body will enjoy the highest levels of divine spiritual experience. Then we're talking about the Mashiach coming.
Absolutely. So here we're talking about the Mashiach, which I'll just give a little parenthetical here for a moment. The Jewish view of Mashiach is not some kind of apocalypse. it's also not just a time of peace and love, which it will be, but those will all be symptoms. The fact that there will be kind of an end of days of some sort, and that the fact that there will be peace in the world, and there won't be any more death, and the dead will come alive, all these things are symptoms of a very simple fact. All challenges will dissipate. We will have finally pulled back the curtain completely on this material and physical existence, and all we'll see is the natural, godly energy which is pulsating beneath it. So where are we going with this? So that's the end of the parenthetical, right? So back to the topic at hand. So our question is, why would Hashem make it in this way? If he wants us to trust him, if he wants us to believe in him, make it in such a way that we should see that he's the one who provides for us the sustenance. Says Rabbi Nechaya, are you kidding me? That would defy the whole purpose of existence. Hashem wanted to make it that you're going to work. And yes, when you work harder, you do make more money, right? At the same time, he's in full control. But he wants to play this game with you where he puts you in control, and he makes it hard for you to recognize and to believe and to show and therefore to serve Hashem, or the godly existence, which is really behind everything, right? And this is reason number one that Rabbeinu Bechaya gives why Hashem says it needs to be a balance between the two. And there is the correct answer as to how much balance is the right amount of balance. And we already start to see, by the way, the hints as to what that correct balance is. That correct balance is going to be somewhere where at the same time we're doing as much as Hashem wants us to do, but at the same time we are completely in recognition that he is in full control of the whole thing. In other words, we recognize that it's really God giving everything to us. We'll talk about that more later. We're going to get to the balance and how much is too much. But for now, reason number one is Hashem puts this challenge here in order for us to overcome it. He makes it specifically that there should be difficulty in reaching this decision. What is the right balance? And that then when we overcome it, we bring this beautiful divine energy into the lowest realm possible, into the human being, into the physical world, where it seems to defy God, and it seems to show the exact opposite. With this, we'll conclude lesson number 9 of faith and trust in God.